And where's Alvin?
Mr. Speaker, sir, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. Sir, the financial sector is dynamic and rapidly evolving, driven by innovation, digitalization, and the design of new products and services. The sector has transformed significantly in recent years in terms of the types of transactions and the persons, institutions, and technology conducting these transactions. We must ensure that MAS keeps abreast of these developments and that we equip it with the necessary tools to facilitate the development of these new products and services while managing the risks involved. There are two key angles in this bill that will improve MAS's effectiveness in doing this. First, it enhances MAS's regulatory and enforcement framework across the financial sector, besides the rules designed for each segment of the sector. We will consolidate some of MAS's powers on similar issues which are currently spread across various acts into one single bill. For instance, the proper management of technology risk and measures to instill proper conduct amongst professionals in the financial sector. Second, it addresses regulatory challenges presented by the digitalization and transformation of financial markets. Let me speak briefly on why these are needed and the important improvements. First, the need to enhance sector-wide regulatory effectiveness. Now, MAS presently regulates the financial sector through various acts, each of which focuses on specific sectors and activities. For example, the Securities and Futures Act regulates the capital markets and its participants, while the Insurance Act deals with the activities of insurance firms and agents, amongst others. And because the regulatory framework is structured in this manner, certain MAS powers, such as the power to issue prohibition orders or POs, or the power to impose technology risk management requirements, can be found in the different acts, sometimes in differing forms. They may also not be found in all of the MAS-administered acts. For instance, the current powers to issue POs only apply to persons who provide capital market services, financial advisory services, or insurance services. And this is clearly not comprehensive enough, as it leaves out other traditional sectors such as banking, as well as newer ones like payment services. There are also other powers in the MAS Act which cut across the different sectors within the financial sector. These include 1, those relating to anti-money laundering and the countering of financing of terrorism, AML-CFT, and 2, the resolution of FIs in distress and financial industry dispute resolution schemes. Now, these powers will now be housed under the FSM bill, which acts as an omnibus bill. Sir, as I mentioned, the second key angle of the bill is digitalization, which is fundamentally transforming the financial sector. For example, vastly more financial transactions are now conducted digitally through mobile applications, and virtual assets such as bitcoins and non-fungible tokens, NFTs, are becoming more common globally. MAS is committed to facilitating the growth opportunities presented by digital finance and the cheaper and more convenient services it often brings for consumers, while guarding against new risks involved. These digital transformations could disrupt and challenge existing regulatory frameworks, which were designed for more traditional forms of financial transactions and services. For example, digital token service providers, or DT service providers, could easily structure their businesses to evade regulation in any one jurisdiction, as they operate mainly online. And we could be exposed to reputational risks brought by DT service providers created in Singapore, and which provide services relating to virtual assets such as Bitcoin outside of Singapore. So this FSM bill seeks to mitigate such risks by licensing these players and imposing AML-CFT requirements on them. The bill also enhances MAS's powers to ensure that FIs bolster the security and resilience of digital services. In short, To continue safeguarding Singapore's financial stability and maintaining public confidence in our financial sector, we must update our regulatory and enforcement framework to plug existing gaps and keep up with new risks emerging from an increasingly integrated, digitized, and complex financial market. MAS has consulted both industry and the public and received broad support for the FSM bill. MAS has then incorporated the feedback received into the FSM bill where appropriate. Sir, I will now go through each of the 4 key aspects of the FSM bill, starting with the power to issue prohibition orders. The FSM bill provides MAS with broad powers to impose POs against persons who have shown themselves to be unfit to perform key roles, activities, and functions in the financial industry. POs are issued in cases of serious misconduct, such as to individuals who have been convicted of fraud or dishonesty in respect of their dealings with customers. The issuance of such POs can also deter others from committing similar lapses. However, there are limitations to MAS's current PO powers. MAS can only issue POs to certain specified persons under the Financial Advisors Act, or FAA, the Securities and Futures Act, SFA, and the Insurance Act, IA, such as trading representatives and insurance agents. However, there are people who work in the financial industry who do not fall within these existing categories. For example, it would not be possible to issue a PO to a bank manager unless he is also a person to whom POs may be issued under any of the 3 previously mentioned acts. Furthermore, while MAS has been decisive in issuing POs to individuals who have committed serious misconduct, such as in the 1MDB case, its powers have only enabled it to prohibit individuals from carrying out key regulated activities under the 3 acts, such as providing financial advisory services. And MAS's existing powers do not extend to prohibiting persons from carrying out other activities, including providing payment services or conducting other important functions in the financial industry, such as risk management or compliance and the administration of critical systems. The FSM bill broadens the categories of persons who may be subject to POs, rationalizes the grounds for issuing POs from a list of specific criteria to a single fit and proper test, and then widens the scope of prohibition to cover functions that are critical to the integrity and functioning of financial institutions. The revised PO powers are broadly aligned with those in Australia, Hong Kong, the UK, and the US. MAS will continue to exercise its PO powers judiciously, taking into account the nature and severity of each misconduct and its actual and potential impact of trust in our financial sector. Existing checks and balances will continue to apply. Before MAS issues a PO to any person, the person has the opportunity to make representations to MAS. And if MAS proceeds with issuing a PO, the person has the right to appeal to the minister. Sir, I will next speak on the enhanced regulation of DT service providers for money laundering and terrorist financing, or MLTF risks. Now, the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, has strengthened international standards for virtual asset service providers, or VASPs, in June 2019 for this purpose. We have already made amendments to existing legislation to implement these enhanced standards. VASPs are termed as digital token service providers for the purpose of the FSM bill, and I shall refer to them as DT service providers. Entities that conduct the business of providing digital token DT services in Singapore are subject to current legislation regardless of where they are established. However, DT service providers created in Singapore but without providing any DT services in Singapore are currently unregulated for AML CFT. Further, these entities may claim to be headquartered here to take advantage of Singapore's global reputation, and this creates reputational risks for Singapore. This regulatory lacuna is global, where a DT service provider established in one jurisdiction does not provide services in that jurisdiction but offers its services digitally to other markets. The gap in the current global regulatory framework leads to no single jurisdiction having sufficient regulatory hold over the DT service provider for its ML and TF controls. Now, to close this gap, the enhanced FATF standards require DT service providers to be at least licensed or registered in the jurisdiction or jurisdictions where they are created. Now, persons that provide DT services in Singapore will continue to be regulated under existing MAS-administered acts. The FSM Bill will regulate all persons in Singapore who conduct a business of providing DT services purely outside of Singapore, if they are created in or operate their businesses from Singapore. The FSM Bill will regulate such DT service providers as a new class of financial institutions, primarily for MLTF risks. The FSM Bill will introduce licensing requirements and general powers over DT service providers, including powers for MAS to conduct AML, CFT inspections, and to render assistance to domestic authorities and MAS's foreign AML, CFT supervisory counterparts. MAS will also impose other requirements on DT service providers such that they have a meaningful presence in Singapore, and MAS has adequate supervisory oversight over them. The AML CFT requirements imposed on DT service providers will be aligned with the requirements imposed on digital payment token service providers regulated under the Payment Services Act. Sir, I will now speak on the harmonized power to impose requirements in technology risk management, TRM. Now, the bill consolidates existing TRM requirements made under various MAS-administered acts by introducing powers within the FSM bill that apply to any financial institution or class of financial institutions. The powers will enable MAS to impose requirements in TRM as well as in the safe and sound use of technology to deliver financial services and to protect data. As I mentioned earlier, financial institutions today rely heavily on technology to deliver financial services. However, the current maximum penalty that can be imposed for breaches of TRM requirements are not commensurate with the potential widespread impact to FI's customers and the financial industry that could result from such breaches. With the passing of the FSM bill, the maximum penalty for each breach of a TRM requirement will be raised to Singapore $1 million per breach. A technology event which impacts an FI's customers or other industry participants could involve breaches of several TRM requirements. So this means that a FI could face a much higher than the $1 million financial penalty for a serious cyber attack or disruption to essential financial services where multiple breaches of TRM requirements are established. For example, an ATM network disruption or online trading disruption. Now, the quantum proposed is intended to underscore the critical importance of TRM to FI's operations and the sound functioning of our financial system. Now, the quantum was derived after considering existing penalty regimes of various other jurisdictions and Singapore government agencies. For example, a contravention of the relevant provisions in the Telecommunications Act and Personal Data Protection Act can attract a financial penalty of 1 million Singapore dollars. In Hong Kong, a breach of data protection requirements can result in a financial penalty of 1 million Hong Kong dollars. In addition to the penalty imposed for a breach of TRM requirements, MAS is empowered to take other supervisory actions, such as requiring FIs to set aside additional regulatory capital until MAS is satisfied that adequate technology risk control measures have been put in place to address deficiencies. Lastly, let me speak on the statutory protection from liability for mediators, adjudicators, and employees of an operator of an approved dispute resolution scheme. Now, presently, an adjudicator, employee, officer, or representative of the Financial Industry Dispute Resolution Centre, or FIDREC, which operates an approved financial centre dispute resolution scheme, is contractually conferred certain protection from claims by a complainant or an FI. The FSM bill will provide statutory protection for such persons. This will strengthen the confidence and autonomy of these individuals when they carry out their duties and align the level of protection for them more closely with that of other public dispute resolution bodies in Singapore and internationally. They will be protected from liability if they acted with reasonable care and in good faith in the course of mediating or adjudicating a dispute. They will, however, continue to be liable for acts involving willful misconduct, negligence, fraud, or corruption. Mr. Speaker, sir, in conclusion, the FSM bill will enable and empower MAS to respond more effectively to the opportunities and challenges posed by a dynamic and rapidly evolving financial sector. It will also position Singapore to strengthen its role and reputation as a safe, trusted, and innovative global financial sector that creates good jobs and opportunities for our people. Sir, I beg to move. And I beg to move.